So I'm the the Deputy CEO and the Chief Commercial Officer in Ascelia Pharma. There will be some forward-looking statements, so pay attention to this. In Ascelia Pharma, we work with rare cancer conditions. It's called orphan oncology. When it's a rare cancer condition, we have the opportunity to help a small patient population that has a high unmet need. We have 2 programs in clinical development. One is a diagnostic drug for patients who have suspected or confirmed cancer in the liver, but who are also at risk if they use the diagnostic drugs that we use when we have an MRI imaging procedure. So when we go into an MRI machine, we improve the image by using a diagnostic drug. We call it a contrast agent. For the patients who have poor kidneys, they can be at risk, and we can help them with an alternative. I'll talk mostly about this compound today. We are very excited because we have completed the enrollment of patients in the last clinical study we need before submitting to the authorities. So it's a very exciting time for us. The other compound we have in development is a daily tablet formulation of a very well-known and potent chemotherapy, and we will develop this into gastric cancer. I'll come back to this one as well. Our focus and where we add value is that we find these assets and we find out how they can help patients and take them through development and commercialization. So that means we are not so focused on the early work in laboratories, but in all the heavy steps it takes to bring a product to market. We are listed on Västra in Stockholm, and we have our head office global team in Hyllie, where we have colleagues from different places, of course some Swedish, but also quite a global and international team. So to talk more about Orviglance, the first product. I'm just looking at, I can see the time. Yes, I can see the time. So the first product, Orviglance. So cancer in the liver is a big concern in cancer care. And it's one of the cornerstones of helping patients with, we call it, better outcomes. And that is because not only is liver cancer a common cancer type, but many cancer types develop metastases in the liver. So if you have colorectal cancer, you have a 70% likelihood of developing liver metastases. It's common in other cancer types as well. And oftentimes the liver metastases are the reasons why patients will die and die earlier if we don't find these liver metastases. So the way to find liver metastases and find them as early as possible is to do imaging, diagnostic procedures. The standard of care is to do an MRI imaging procedure. Those are common, and I'm sure we all have family and friends who have been in an imaging procedure with an MRI. You may know that we use these contrast agents or imaging drugs, as they are called. All of the imaging drugs available today are based on gadolinium. Gadolinium is a toxic heavy metal. It has been used for decades in MRI imaging. They are well established. 15 years ago, we found out that the patients who also had poor kidneys, they had difficulties excreting the gadolinium from their body because it's excreted through the kidneys. So if you also have severe kidney impairment, you are at risk because the gadolinium is retained in your body and you can develop some very severe side effects. There was a link discovered to a quite severe side effect called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis. We call it NSF, about 15 years ago. And all the contrast agents with gadolinium on the market, they were added a black box warning, as we call it, from the regulatory authorities, the FDA, to say you should be aware of the risks for this patient population. For them, the recommended practice is to have an MRI without a contrast agent. So they will not have the same quality of image and therefore the same quality of care as patients who will have a gadolinium contrast agent. These patients we can help with our contrast agent because we have a liver-specific contrast agent based on manganese. Manganese is a natural trace element and it has paramagnetic properties. When we take it orally, it's taken up by the healthy liver cells and not by sick liver cells. So it will improve the image and the physician can see the difference between the sick liver cells and the healthy liver cells. And this contrast agent is not associated with any of the risks that we associate with gadolinium. So these patients are not common because they have or may have cancer in the liver and they have severe kidney function. But they have a very high unmet need, which is an opportunity to launch Orviglance, this product, to a well-defined patient population, which also means a high value. In the US alone, it's around 50,000 patients and 100,000 procedures annually. And globally, the market opportunity for Orviglance is $800 million. Most of this in the US, or half of it in the US, but the biggest market is in the US. So where are we in the clinical development? We have 9 clinical studies, 8 completed, 1 where we are waiting for the results, the last one. All of these clinical studies so far have showed strong efficacy of our compound Orviglance versus mainly the unenhanced MRI image, which is what we compare to. And all the studies have also shown a very good safety profile. These are the things we need. The last step is we have finished the biggest clinical study, we call it the phase 3 study, in terms of patient recruitment. And we are now waiting for the results of this study, which we will have this summer. So that is the next big milestone for Orviglance. So what are we actually looking for? And what do these images look like? So here you have an example. On the left side, you have an example of the standard of care for our patient population, an unenhanced MRI image. And the next one, with the orange circle, you have an image where the patient has received Orviglance. And there's clearly a lesion, as we say, where you can see it on one image, but it's very hard to see it on the image on the left side. So actually, to pass the exam of our clinical study and the phase 3 study, we need to ask, and this is a standard design of this study, we ask 3 radiologists to score these 2 images against each other. How big is the difference between the contrast, the black and white contrast, and how sharp is the edge of the lesion that you can see on both images? 2 out of 3 of these need to agree that the image on the right is better than the image on the left. Then we've passed the exam. And we have tested this methodology, and we have strong existing data to support our confidence in positive phase 3 outcomes. So for example, one of the studies, we passed this exam both in terms of the image being better, but also with a very high statistical significance. So we're waiting to fill in these 2 question marks for the phase 3 study. So to talk about the market opportunity for Orviglance, I mentioned 800 million globally, specifically for the patients with liver cancer and severely impaired kidney function. We looked at actual procedures in the US to determine these estimates. And we talked to payers, so the healthcare systems in key European markets and in the US markets, to test the willingness to pay, as we call it. Are you willing to pay and reimburse this product? And how much are you willing to pay? So we have good confidence in this market opportunity. As you can see, almost half is the US market. Our strategy is to drive the launch in the US on our own, of course supported by American experts, and to find partners in other markets where they have existing infrastructure and capabilities to drive an optimal launch. And I'll come back to what that means. So one is what is in the guidelines and what do we know about gadolinium and the concerns around gadolinium. What do physicians say when we ask them? 90% of radiologists are concerned with the safety risks associated with gadolinium. 16% of them, or many of them, have actually experienced these cases of nephrogenic systemic fibrosis, which is the reason why we have the black box warning. But they also have other general concerns with gadolinium. And there are some discussions that over the last 2 years have further, you can say, created the right timing for an alternative to gadolinium. And those include, not least, that we know gadolinium is retained in the brain and in bodily tissue. That is well established. And both the guidelines committees and the FDA are now investigating what could the safety impact be in the long run. So the FDA has asked the big gadolinium manufacturers to do a long-term study in patients who have multiple MRIs to find out, does it impact mobility, does it impact brain function? The guideline committees have asked doctors to be more consistent in how they report safety or safety risk or adverse events with gadolinium. So they are recommending a new safety category, so to say. We also know that gadolinium is excreted when we use it into the sewage system through urine, and it's very hard to clean from the sewage system. So it ends up in our rivers and waters. There have been tests demonstrating that you can find it in Coca-Cola, you can find it in our tap water, especially concentrated among in the larger cities. We don't know what the long-term impact is, but we know that there is a drive to be more observant and to understand the impact, and also now a push to see a future with less gadolinium, maybe no gadolinium. So for years, the big manufacturers, that's GE Healthcare, Bayer, 2 European companies called Bracco and Gerbe, for years they were saying, gadolinium has been around for years and it works. Now they're also saying we need to look at alternatives. And 2 of these companies have launched together, are launching right now, a gadolinium that's only a half dose. So that was launched last year, or approved last year and launched early this year. And the FDA actually decided to give them a faster review than the standard review. This is quite surprising given that gadolinium has been around for years. So that gives us confidence that there is a drive both from the industry and a pull from our stakeholders to have less gadolinium and maybe no gadolinium. There is one very early stage project from one of the big players to have a contrast agent also based on manganese. They have just finished the phase 1 study. So that is GE Healthcare. But that is actually an imaging drug for the full body. It's not specific for the liver. So we are really excited that we will be the first to market with an alternative to gadolinium for liver imaging. So a little bit back to how we are going to launch this. The US is by far the biggest opportunity. We have an opportunity to build a top line, to build revenue, to retain the value in Ascelia Pharma by building the strategic capabilities with a US team. There are today established players that will help with a lot of the operations. It's very common to select some processes, some things that you will outsource and work with some established players for this. So our job and our focus is to execute the plan we have for gradually building up and launching in the US. Our plan is also to find partners in other markets who have an existing infrastructure, who have the relationships so they can execute the optimal launch in some of the major European markets and in Japan and other Asian markets as a starting point, and then rest of the world. So what does it take in terms of team to launch in the US? So when we look at this real-world data set that we have, we can see actual imaging procedures, MRI procedures for our target patient population. So I can see at which hospital this procedure was done. I can even see the name of the physician. So I can see that most of the market 75% of our market opportunity is really driven by around 2,000 radiologists in the US. And these radiologists are found at around 400 hospital groups. So these patients have multiple complications: cancer, severe kidney disease, maybe they are on dialysis. And that is why they are found at the larger hospitals who have all these experts in-house. This actually means today, where it's about working with key opinion leaders, working with the adoption in the healthcare system through reimbursement, that we can launch with a very focused team. Around 40 FTEs can drive the launch in the US. Most of them are in the field, and they are experts. So when you have an orphan drug with a small patient population, you can do a focused launch where the importance is not really the amount of sales reps you have, but really about the specialized team who work with the key drivers of adoption. That is why this is such a unique opportunity and why we can do this launch ourselves. So we have a plan for the launch, and we have the roadmap, and we started out with a strong foundation in terms of strategy. We started working with key opinion leaders. We started our work on publications. We know how to get the reimbursement. We have tested the price. So we're gradually building up. We have a team in Hylje, where we have across the team actually experience from more than 20 global launches with a US focus. Many of us, of course, from the companies you know, Lundbeck, Novo, and Novartis, and so forth. We, of course, also need to gradually build the infrastructure, and we are on track with this plan towards our launch. So to summarize Orviglance, it's a well-defined opportunity for a patient population with an unmet need that isn't addressed today. We know that what we offer is that an enhanced MRI image with Orviglance is better than an unenhanced MRI image. We can see from our studies that we see 33% more lesions, which is similar to what you would expect with a gadolinium contrast agent. And when we ask doctors today, showing them the profile of the product, would you use this at launch? 84% say, yes, I will definitely use this, or I will most likely use this product at launch. So we are excited as we look towards the headline results this summer and to ramp up our launch and realize this potential in an $800 million market opportunity. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Oncoral. I can see I have some quotes. Beyond the numbers, when we talk to the supporters here, they do recognize their clinical experience, not only from the numbers, and say, yes, this is a strong image, and yes, we believe that the medical community will support this product. So a little bit about Oncoral. I will not spend so much time on Oncoral today. So in chemotherapy, irinotecan is a well-established drug. And we all have family, friends, colleagues who have had experience with chemotherapy. And we know that sometimes the efficacy of the drug is achieved on a trade-off with the safety, that you can feel very sick, especially right after a dosing that you typically have every 3 weeks. So we have a daily tablet formulation of irinotecan. And we know from both our own early phase 1 studies and we know from literature that by having a daily formulation, we have the potential to work to improve this trade-off and to improve, therefore, both the efficacy and the safety for these patients. So where are we now? We are focusing on helping patients with gastric cancer as the first step. And we know that in gastric cancer, it's not very common, but there's a high unmet need because there's a lot of other compounds today that are not approved in gastric cancer. We know that Oncoral is well tolerated from our phase 1 studies, and we even saw some stable disease, which is what you aim to see when you do the early stage studies. So we have confidence in the design of our phase 2 study. Typically, what you do is you don't go for a new compound. You would go at a later stage initially, so it's not the first line treatment, as we say, not the first type of treatment, but second and third, and you would also combine it with another drug. We are developing a program where we combine it with a drug called Lonsurf, which is also an oral agent, so you can essentially have all your therapy orally and at home. And we see that there's a potential for a synergistic effect between these two compounds. So we have partnered with the organization developing Lonsurf, and they will provide the drug free of charge. Right now, we have the program for the phase 2 designed. It has been approved by the FDA, the IND, to start the study. But we did put it on pause because we wanted to make sure we completed the Orviglance program before we sort of reinvested into Oncoral. So that is our next step. So as mentioned, there's a high unmet need in gastric cancer. But if you look at irinotecan, it's well known to be a potent therapy for solid tumors in many cancer types. The two, not the dark orange, but the other two, colorectal and pancreatic cancer, that's where irinotecan is already approved. But in many other cancer types, irinotecan is used in clinical practice, and there are studies supporting the efficacy and safety profile. So we have opportunities starting in gastric cancer to expand into other indications. The strategy for Oncoral is to complete the phase 2 study ourselves, and then we would find a partner that would develop the phase 3 program, which is typically a larger program for this kind of drug. So I want to round off here. With Orviglance, we have a first-in-class, often diagnostic drug to help a patient population with a high unmet need and an $800 million commercial opportunity. We have completed the phase 3 enrollment, and we're expecting the headline results this summer, and our launch preparations are on track. And with Orviglance, we have an attractive potential in gastric cancer and beyond to help patients in solid tumors. Yeah.
Thank you for a great presentation, Julie. And I think for the sake of continuity, let's continue in English for the last 3 minutes, perhaps. I would like to remind our viewers online, if you have a question, you can type that in the chat function. And for our audience here, of course, just raise your hand and we will pass around the mic. But perhaps I will start by asking you about the Sparkle study, which has been quite a headache perhaps for you. It has taken quite a lot longer than you expected. And the patient enrollment in the end was quite a bit lower than you initially thought, for various reasons. Could that be an indication that perhaps the patient group or the radiologists out there are not as keen as you thought on using the product, or are there other reasons why?
Thank you. Yes, I agree that it took longer, but to me, when I look at the data we have, when we talk to physicians, when we test the market potential for this drug, there's no indication that the unmet need is not there, that the patients are not there, that payers are not willing to reimburse and pay for this. So I have good confidence in the commercial potential for Orviglance. And actually, to what you also mentioned in terms of the enrollment speed, the last couple of months where we were post-COVID and all the operations up and running again, we actually saw the enrollment speed that we did plan for in the beginning. And that was, I think, the first patient was enrolled a month before the COVID lockdown. So at the end, we actually saw the enrollment speed that we expected, and I have good confidence in the commercial potential.
Good. And I believe you also had quite a few centers based in Russia, and for obvious reasons, they were discontinued. Yeah. You mentioned in your presentation that there is quite a good momentum for alternatives to gadolinium-based contrast agents. Could that be a signal that you're perhaps evaluating Orviglance also for people without impaired kidney function, since the results seem to be basically the same without the side effects?
The right place to start is really right now with a focused launch for the patients where the unmet need is highest, because that's where we get the biggest value per patient. The gadolinium contrast agents are a generic market. It's a big volume market. It's different players. It's Bayer and GE. When you ask me, is there potential in the future? I think so. But then it's a different business model. It's a volume business model, it's lower price, and then one day you look at the trade-off between the two. Right now, for Ascelia Pharma, the best strategy is to aim for the patients with the highest unmet need and drive the success with a high-value product. But the future will tell us what the next steps could be.
It makes sense. And I think we have one more minute for one last question, perhaps. And if we don't have anyone from the audience, I'll take it myself. I think in a previous presentation, you or your CEO has indicated that a commercial launch, will be about 1.5 years after the readout from the study, which you expect this summer. Would it be fair to assume that if the readout is as you plan, that a launch could be done late 2024?
We haven't communicated the timelines for our next steps. So the answer is, of course, we want to launch as soon as possible. And we look forward to communicating the next step timelines at the right time. So right now we're waiting for the headline results, and we want to submit to the NDA as soon as possible, and then we want to launch as soon as possible. But the one simple answer is, if you look at a benchmark, it does take around a year from you submit to the FDA until you actually have the product in the market. But I look forward to telling you about the timelines
the future
on another occasion.
And yes, perhaps I'm not all that much off. Thank you so much, Julie, for a great presentation.
It was great being here. Thank you.
Great.